Welcome to the season 3 of the Stars and Scrums Rugby Europe's official podcast. This season we're going to go for the men's and women's Rugby Europe Championship and also other competitions. But today it's about the men's Rugby Europe Championship, which starts next week with, on the 3rd, because I don't know if the podcast is going to go out this week or just some days before the first games. With me, you have French journalist Gauthier Baudin. Will Owen from the Squidge Bros, like the Super Mario Bros, but the Squidge Bros in this case, and Nick Heath, one of the lead comms of the Rugby Europe competitions. So it's a very jolly group of good people here to talk about the Men's Rugby Europe Championship. And Nick, I'm going to start with you because I'm going to get ahead of everyone. You're going to be in Bucharest for one of the games, so to do a little bit of promotion on site and talking with fans and promote the game. So you have been with Rugby Europe for a long time. How can you explain to fans that are not really on tune with it and it's going to be their first time, what is the Men's Rugby Europe Championship all about?
Well, ultimately, it's an opportunity for us to see the rest of the talent that we may be seeing crop up in probably places like the top 14 and around various aspects of club rugby, perhaps where players might be in their ones and twos in particular clubs, coming together to play for their countries. And I think probably the most recent cultural reference point is that Rugby World Cup, where we saw the likes of Portugal, really, really putting a marker down, creating an amazing environment and atmosphere for the fans. And if you're the sort of person that gets behind that and loves that as a feeling, well, you've basically got that times 10 with the atmosphere and the fun that goes on during the Rugby Championship, because these teams are not generally selling out huge stadia. It's not as big as the tier 1 Six Nations, but it is full of heart, full of soul, full of passion, and full of players that are giving it absolutely everything, in most cases alongside having to hold down a full-time job at the same time. And you put that all together and you have teams that are going hell for leather against each other and will end up in tussles that come down to single points, one try or another. There are, so often qualification factors at play as well as part of the Rugby Europe Championship. And for me, it's a chance to have this great game being played in so many more unique places. And I am hugely excited that, having earned enough air miles from having commentated on about 415 Rugby Europe games, that they will now finally allow me to go on site and that we will go to Bucharest. Never been to Romania before, so I'm hugely excited about that Romania-Portugal game coming up in a few weeks.
Nick, what was your first game for Rugby Europe? Do you remember it?
Oh, no, absolutely. I work as a commentator where the information is in front of me for about 2-3 days. Then there's a solid 6 hours of prep. And then once the final whistle goes, the notes get put to one side and all the information leaves my head immediately. I'm very envious of all my sort of, tends to be my written journalist colleagues who can remember who was replaced in the 69th minute of the second Lions test in Australia in 2013. I mean, what? I can barely remember who scored the second try.
Sexton.
In the thanks, Will. I can barely remember what I had for dinner last night, but that's it.
Will, you and your brother have been huge ambassadors for, let's scrap off the T2 designation, the emerging nation scene. Why? What do you see in the Men's Rugby Europe Championship? What drives you to watch the games, feel passionate about it, and how would you call new fans to come and join the party?
I think ultimately it's the perfect place to find your new favourite player, who's going to be your favourite player in 2-3 years' time. That my first real experience of falling in love with Tier 2 rugby came in the 2011 Rugby World Cup, where we got up first thing in the morning to watch. We watched every single game of that championship. And one of the first ones we watched was Namibia against Fiji. And in the 3rd minute of that game, the fly half, Tynes Kotzer for Namibia, stepped up from 60 metres to take a penalty and got it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this guy is just as good as the guys that we watch week in, week out, in the Premiership and other leagues like that. And then realizing that guy Kotzer then went on and scored 3 drop goals in the next 15 minutes of that game. And I just thought, I'm obsessed with this guy. And then from there on out, watching, other games in the World Cup made me realize I have to watch these teams the rest of the 4 years round, because there are so many exciting players that I will miss out on if I don't do that, right? So with that, the Rugby Europe Championship, it's very often that we wake up to watch the Six Nations. We celebrate Sixmas in our household, the start of the Six Nations. But it's very often the case on Six Nations weekends that by the time you wake up in the UK, there is already an REC game that started that you can then just put on as kind of like your warm-up, if nothing else. And then you can see a new player that you've never seen before, and you can go, great, Pedro Betancourt can really hit a line, You can look at stuff like that, and that will really help you. It will help you learn. And then when it comes to watching these players qualify for a World Cup or even play in a World Cup in years to come, it makes you then feel really passionate about that when the World Cup happens. And obviously, we shouldn't view all of international rugby as building up to a World Cup. But if you have the whole 4 years round, an opportunity to watch these players play who are, players at the absolute height of their game, who have completely different backstories, really interesting backstories, different from a lot of the players you do see playing in the top leagues in, so-called tier 1 nations. Mm-hmm. It's just such a different opportunity to see a growing side of the sport that you don't get in other parts of rugby.
Oh, that's very important to know and good to know. A question about how you work, and so we can understand what we can do with the rec content. Because about Six Nations, the championship, and so on, we have a lot of content, videos, analysis, and so on. So, what would you advise people to do with Rugby Europe Championship, be it the men's, the women's, or the under 18s, or this type of content? What would you like to see more in the years to come, starting 2024?
I think with all rugby content generally, the best way to help grow the game and to engage people in it is to just talk as positively as you can. It's something that I've really, really learned, because there are so many amazing sides to rugby, and it's so easy to get caught up in negative sides of social media and talking about like refereeing decisions and things that ultimately don't have any answer to it, that it's much more productive and, if anything, like healthy for the sport, that if we look at the positives, because every single team will have a player in there that you can look at and go like, that guy would crack, the Wales team or the Scotland team or whatever. And every single player will have an attribute that you look at and go like, let's just, pick out, let's say, Raphael Storti, and look at him and go like, that guy is as quick as the wingers that are playing for England or for France or whatever. And if you just look at the positive side of anything you can in rugby, there will always be something you can find there, and it makes the game more fascinating tenfold.
Okay, that's very good to know. So Storti is as quick as any French winger. So Storti up no, Will.
I've got a little bit of bias, but I mean, Storti's not. Penno's not scored as many tries this season, has he? So
you're going for Storti then.
Of course I am.
Okay, that's good to know. Gauthier, you have been following the Rugby Europe competition for a couple of years now, but last season you worked with the Rugby Europe Super Cup. So what was your first experience with the competition, and how do you see progressing forward? So what's your opinion about it?
There's like a huge, in French we say like marge de progression, which is like how much you can go to progress about. And I think the Rugby Europe is quite something that you can progress on, because it's only 2 months. So you can put a huge exposition on it without getting hundreds and thousands of euros or pounds, on it, because it's only 2 months. So you can provide something that is great, and you have all the stadium about it, and you have quite a good players on the circuit. So we saw with the Black Lion this year, and we saw how amazing there was against Scarlets. It was not fancy or fantastic, but it was hard. It was like rock solid. And even though the Welsh rugby state at the moment is not really good, it's still a huge win for Black Lion, because it's their first win. So you just have to build on it. And I don't know how they want to manage it, but you have to build a bridge between either the URC or other competition, because the team in the Rugby Europe Super Cup deserve to be better at a better level, because we have to, because if you want to have the best development of rugby, you have also to look under the top 10 or the top 20. I think we also like all the Brazilian video footage against the Maori All Black where they explode the scrum, and it's always the little thing like that make you think that what if we really invest money in this country and we try to not do like, if you go past the top 20s nation, it's bad, but what if we try to go to 30s, and then in 10 or 20 years we go to 40, sorry, and it's always like going to not the top and prioritizing like we do at the moment the top nation, but trying to grow what we can call the tier 3, tier 4 nation. I don't know what you call it beside the tier 3. So if we want to, honestly, like Rugby Europe Super Cup is one of those things that made me really hopeful, and I hope you too, but really hopeful about the development of rugby, because even though the decision of how do you say, like the directors and all the top dirigeants, I don't know how you say in English, but the directors of rugby, it's always like we saw it with the Nation League, it's always prioritizing the top nation who a little bit messed up their financial because they went about a little too, comfortable without, I think you have the Welsh case, but you're also the Australian, I think, but it's always like that. You have to develop the top team to have the mid team, if you want to call it like that, but we have to try to help the little team or the little nation on this case. And in my opinion, Rugby Europe is one of those things that makes things can change. Sorry, my English not really good.
No, perfect. Gauthier, the Rugby World Cup was played in France. The Black Line played against 2 French teams in the Challenge Cup. So there was a lot of talking about the other nations aside from the top ones. So what's the feeling in the French media at the moment? Do you think the French media and French clubs are starting to notice more these type of nations like Portugal, Germany, Romania, and so on?
At the moment, yes, they did, especially during the RWC, because we had like Lagisquet coaching Portugal, but now we also have David Gerard, who is going to be the coach of Romania, and there's always like the French, not parasite, but always the French coach somewhere in a staff, and you were like, oh, it's a way to attach the news about tier 2 rugby to French, because it's people we know, like Lagisquet is a French legend, so obviously you're going to follow him, and he has been pretty open to interviews with French media, so we saw him quite a bit. We also had a big interview about his successor, but didn't go well. So, but we also have a little bit of mediatization about this team, but it always has to do with a French thing. So even like this week, we had several reporters in Tbilisi to cover the game against Clermont-Ferrand, but it's because Black Lion was going to play a French team. So, but even though if it's only that, it's still good, but we can do a lot better. And I think you're going to talk about it. I might be spoiling, but I think the final day where everything is going to happen in Stade Jean-Bouin in France is kind of something that can be worked on the media platform in France.
We'll talk about a little bit about later, but it's exactly that. The finals day of the Rugby Europe Championship, the men's one, is going to be played all in Paris in the same day. Nick, you've said it, you commented a lot of games in the Rugby Europe competitions and in the men's Rugby Europe Championship. Do you think the competition evolved and had a good development in the last 4 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to pick up on Gauthier's point there, actually, just also about one of those reasons to love the Rugby Europe Championship. You find out where coaches and players have gone since they finished playing, or where they're on their way to their next coach. You know, Bradley Davis popping up in the coaching ranks alongside Christian Hitt, and Lynn Jones just gently travelling his way from Russia across the Netherlands to decide which coaching ticket he's going to pick up next. You get to see where these coaches and players turn up, and I think that's really interesting, catching people on their coaching journey as well. But yeah, the overall standard, I think, has been really improving, and the competitive nature of the games. It is brilliant that ultimately, because of where the sort of nations are, calling Portugal against Spain last year was an absolute highlight. It was one of the most exciting games there's ever been. The wind can be slightly taken out of one's sails by certain other political wranglings sometimes, but the game, the 80 minutes that you tune into, is absolutely gripping. And yeah, I think the standards that we've seen have really risen over the years, and you can see, even within certain teams, you can see players developing themselves. Some of the youngsters that have been coming through that might be sort of taking a role at fly half, and you're thinking, well, are they able to cope with it? And actually they're pinging 50-22s into corners. They're giving their teams opportunities. I think it's a really exciting competition. People are still playing to a good level, and they're playing teams around their level, which ultimately makes it competitive, and there aren't quite as many foregone conclusions as perhaps people might think.
About what you're saying, the foregone conclusions about the last year, do you have any standout moment that you remember, or you're already making room for new moments to happen this season?
Yeah, probably a few new ones. I'm just trying to go back. Actually, I'm just while I'm sat here, just looking back at some of the team sheets that I did last year. So I was just looking Romania, Portugal, Romania, Poland was actually one of the games I did there. So there we go. It's slowly coming back to me. It was the first test between the two sides in 25 years, which is the sort of history you can also get out of the Rugby Europe Championship. There was a period when I called a few games over the course of a couple of years, where almost every game I did ended up being a massive sort of 20-30 year historic turnaround for one team or another. I was sort of becoming the underdog's great lucky charm, and so yeah. But yeah, I'm trying to look back at what some of the results were to jog my memory. But certainly, a chance to see teams like Georgia that will have a big say on wanting to affect and get into something like the Six Nations and the old promotion and relegation discussion. You get a real opportunity to see them in the Rugby Championship. And yes, they have been dominant, but they've certainly not been without their scares at times as well. And I think that's just as important for the other nations to find out how far they are away from the teams that feel like they might be ready to move on. And it is also a reminder to those teams that lead the pack that actually you're not as far out of this as you might think you are.
Okay. Yeah, about you talked about Romania, Poland, and it's special because Poland is, as you said, after 25 years, first test match against Romania. We talk a lot about expanding competitions to give opportunity to others, and the Rugby Europe Championship, the Men's Rugby Europe Championship, did that from 2022 to 2023. They expanded from 6 to 8, so Germany, Poland, and Belgium came back up. Russia was, well, we don't have to speak about it, but these 3 new teams had an opportunity to shine. So you think that's the way to go, to expand things, to give opportunities, because Belgium since then have been growing and new kids are coming in and to try and test it. And the same thing happening with Poland.
100%. Like, if you told me 5 years ago that, I know this is outside of Europe, that Chile were going to be in a Rugby World Cup, I'd have laughed at you, let alone sort of 10, 15 further years back from that. And so it's one of those things that to a lot of kind of like onlookers, it probably doesn't look that significant. But actually, if you're giving these teams an opportunity to play against the likes of Georgia, who, people are touting as potentially could come in as a bottom seed or thereabouts in the Six Nations, that if these guys now have these opportunities, like you look at Romania playing against Poland last year, and obviously Romania ran away with it with an extremely experienced squad. But, you look at like Poland could get a try past them, which was great. That's the first stepping stone in, potentially loads and loads in Polish rugby. You look at the Netherlands, are potentially they're probably one of the biggest growing markets in all of world rugby, certainly in the men's game, that they could potentially go to a World Cup in, the next 5 or 10 years. And that is such an exciting thing. And the more opportunities we give these teams who, a lot of people haven't watched before, haven't heard of, the more likely it is that they're going to have that experience that will grow them. The more likely it is as well that they're on a good platform where professional teams can watch some of their players. And sometimes it just takes 1 or 2 players signing a professional deal to then lift an entire team up.
So now I'm going to dive into your experience as a content creator, because it's important to unions listen, and also players and so on. What do you think? What tips would you give to them to try to show a bit of how of their work, the behind the scenes thing? So, what would you suggest? What tips do you have for them? Because without content and without knowing who's the player, who's the coach, where their origins, where they want to go, etc., we don't know nothing, and they can't be exposed to more people. So what tips will you bring to them?
It's an interesting question, because a lot of the things that content creators are kind of meant to do are stuff that we're really bad at, using stuff like TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. Like we kind of lack a little bit in that. But from the rugby side of it, it kind of links into the point I was making earlier. But really, when you've got a topic, really, really lean into it and kind of obsess over it. So there's a rule that my brother Robbie, who obviously started the channel, kind of like taught me when I first started like taking on the work as well myself, was just the voice that we always speak in the channel is biased to whatever team we're talking about. That it's always, that is who you want to support. That's who you're technically pretending you want to win the World Cup and the entire, whatever championship it is you're talking about. And even if that means that they're playing against the teams that we actually do support, it's, if we're talking about, if we did a video on, say, the Netherlands or Poland, then the voice would then become, Netherlands rugby is the greatest thing to ever happen to the world, let alone sport, let alone rugby, let alone the Rugby Europe Championship. And that would be the overarching kind of like tone of the whole thing. So I think with regards to that, it is like, get to know as many players as you can, because these people have, worked their backsides off to get to this point where they're international rugby players. They'll have so many like incredible qualities about them. And again, backstories. So just learn as much as you can, bask in it, and just enjoy like learning about this and being a nerd about this and really embrace that. I don't know if it's so much advice, such as, this is how I got here and look at the state I'm in, all I talk about is rugby. But hey ho, it's, it seems to have worked for us so far.
Well, it has been beautifully what you do in your channel. You and your brother, Gauthier. You have also a Twitch. You have a Twitch channel where you discuss a lot of rugby discussions, debates, and so on. So, what would people like you move to do more content about teams like Portugal, Poland, Belgium, be it in the men's or the women's? What would be your ideas for it? How does a content creator like you want willingly to create content about it?
As a journalist, I think I don't know for all my peers or other journalists, but I'm good at asking questions and showing things. It doesn't look like a good thing or about everything in rugby, but when you try to show that in video, it's quite good. And I'm going on trial about a new project video. I'm going 1 week with Belgium Rugby. I'm going to do an inside with them before the game with Portugal. So it's going to be in 2 weeks. I'm going to have like full week with them, with training, talking, speeches, everything. And I think it's kind of the thing I want to show on the channel. It's like, of course, you have like the TV channel who shows like a lot of that, but in my opinion, it's a bit too cut. There's not everything that I've shown, and even though it's not very interesting, you have to show it because even though it's not interesting, it's the everyday of a rugby team, and so I'm going to do that. But of course, I think for other things in Twitch or in YouTube, having more footage about the games, of course, is something you have to fight for. I think the Squidge Bro can attest from that. But yeah, having a more footage is always something that you have to work for. I have the case of the All Blacks. That's an interesting case because the All Blacks occasionally shows the games they played on YouTube for the full games. They take it from Sky Sports. It's 6 or 8 months after the game had happened, but you have the full game, and I think they like managed to do at least 500,000 views about it, and it's still, even though it's 5,000, it's enormous for rugby. We don't really I don't think we don't really calculate on that side, because when you see Mr. Beast doing 70 million, you're 5,000 is not really great. But for rugby, getting somebody to watch a full game of rugby for 2 hours and 5,000 of them did it is something that you have to work for, and you have to keep doing that. And I don't really know why they're the sole team that do it. I didn't see any England or French or Australian or South African do that, but I think that's might be something to do about, and not on the, World Rugby did it with Rugby Pass TV, where you can watch it, but it's behind not a paywall, but you have to subscribe or create an account, and it's not really, it's not for everybody. So YouTube is like a great platform, but it's the same thing for YouTube, for Twitter, for Instagram. You have to use like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, this short videos platform to get them to go to YouTube and watch the full game. Because if you can manage to make someone watch a full game for 2 hours, they're most likely going to do it live for either Six Nations or Rugby Europe Championship or World Cup. So that's something that even with the new generation that's has a really short watch times, they switch a lot. If you manage to make these people that has like 30 seconds or 1 minute watch time watch a rugby game for 2 hours, I think you kind of broke the matrix. So it's something that you have to work for. I think for every competition, the top 14 URC Premiership, even Rugby Europe Championship, that's something that you have to work for. And if you can kind of succeed to break the matrix, you have it. You have the pattern to make rugby popular.
I'm not sure it'll break the matrix, but just to come in on that, it is a really important point. And actually, as much of it is about how content is shared these days. Everybody wants to send everybody the most amazing try they saw. And if the try has been filmed well on a good camera and it's got, good commentary on it, then it's going to do better than something that is none of those things. And sometimes you can have a mediocre try, but if it looks great and sounds great, then people will be sharing it. And I think
not
that's
even a great try. Sometimes it's just like a random action or a random tackle, and just want to tackle your buddies. Like the
100%.
game you did that, and
it might be because he's got the most amazing hairstyle, for example.
Yeah,
But these are all the things that really matter, and it's certainly one of the things I'm most excited about, getting on site when we're in Bucharest, certainly for the finals in Paris as well. We all learned through lockdown that we could do these broadcasts remotely, and that's great that we were able to do so much. But let's get on site. Let's get in. Let's feel the wind in our hair. Let's smell the sweat from the players on the field, and let's tell the stories of these warriors that are out there, because these clips are what's going to sell the stories and the efforts of what these players are doing, and that will really help broaden its appeal.
Just to build on your point there, Nick, so we always do a Moments of the Year video at the end of each calendar year. And a lot of the times a try will be on there just because there's amazing commentary on it. There's like, for example, like the Schuster commentary they do in South Africa. There's always one or two of those that make it in. And like, I remember even with yourself commentating, Nick, there was one, a fight that we put in, which was Scotland versus Argentina in the Autumn Nations. And we just decided we have to leave Nick's commentary in, just because it really adds to the atmosphere of it. And I think you're right that like packaging the whole thing together is what makes the sport so accessible.
Yeah.
Well, here you have some very good pointers and the key to unlock the Rugby matrix, or the web matrix that Gauthier explained, and also Nick, you're talking about going on site to smell the sweat of the players, the smell of the boots touching grass. You are going to be in Bucharest, but let's talk about Paris. How big you think it is to have the finals day in one of the most mythical cities in the world, to host, well, 4 games since midday until evening. So how big it is?
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant, and the fact that I think that there's also, Paris is the city of romance. You get nothing more romantic than going back to the country that hosted the World Cup, that most recently lit the fires in people's hearts about Romania, about Portugal, about Georgia, and actually to see these teams competing in Paris within, on finals day for the Rugby Europe Championship is going to be brilliant. It's St. Patrick's Day as well, I think, which is any excuse to have any excuse to have a Guinness, frankly. And I'm also looking forward to it because, from a personal perspective, it's going to nearly mark 10 years to when I was at Stade Jean Bouin in 2014, when England's women won the Rugby World Cup, and I was there that day. So to be back in Paris at the home of Stade Francais, and to be there and taking in the games and bringing commentary to bring it to life. And this is the thing, what's so exciting about these finals days as they're now happening is all the players are there together. You may be playing in the early game and you get your game done and dusted. You can hang around and have a beer and watch the rest. If you're playing the big games at the end of the day, it's a long day to wait. You know that there are players coming in and out. Maybe you're staying at your hotel, you're waiting to come down there, but it has that big match day feel, and it will have that atmosphere for all of the teams taking part. How fans pace themselves over the course of the day, if they're in for a petit bière or two, well, it might be that there has to be a little zero alcohol in there for the first part of the day, in order for them to remember the score of the final. But yeah, I think it's a brilliant opportunity for there to be so many different nations coming together in one stadium over a day. How often does that happen? Not particularly often. You get it a little bit with sevens, but you've not got 2 national teams playing each other for 80 minutes 4 times, which is going to be pretty remarkable. And I dare say Paris will be superb hosts.
Well, this is a very good way to promote the finals day. It's on the 17th, so it's St. Patrick's Day. It happens everything in that day, so it's going to be massive. Will, you went to the World Cup with your brother. You did a tour. You were 100% dedicated to all. So to have a finals day in Paris with all 8 teams playing each other, how do you think that is big for rugby? Not only for the Rugby Europe Championship, but also for men's rugby?
It's a really good question. I think that one of the big things from an atmosphere point of view, to build on what Nick was saying, is you have so many different groups of fans who have experienced rugby differently, and to bring that then onto the pitch it's a great opportunity to watch 8 different styles of rugby. And how great is that? Because these are 8 teams who have been coached entirely differently, playing at different standards, and they're all going to be really competitive games. So all of these players are going to improve, and then eventually, when one of these players ends up signing to play in the top 14 and becomes that guy who, I don't know, steps Roman Untamak or whatever it is, when that guy is a big household name, you can kind of be that guy who goes, but I was there when he played against Poland in 2024,
Oh yeah, it's interesting you to say that, because there are some people that will be savants just by going to that day, and can showcase in years to go. Gauthier, Paris, it's on your background. So how big it is in your opinion, for rugby to have this finals day, and you think this is going to bring more people from outside these nations to watch the Rugby Europe Championship teams?
It's quite hard to prognosticate, or I don't know what you say it in English, to bet on that.
Prognostics, yes.
But I think it's like 11 million people. I'm like 10 billion short, but now it's 11 million people. So of course there's different communities, and if you advertise it well, you can, I think, have like 10 or 12 1,000 people in the stadium. And even though it's like, you don't think it's a lot, it's kind of a lot for a Rugby Europe Championship, and especially in none of those country stadiums. So it's like, I think if you make friends fall in love with Rugby Europe Championship, even though they're already in love with what's happened with Portugal and Chile and Uruguay and everything about that, but if you manage to make the French hook it on the RSC 2024, you can do everything you want. And in the Stade Jean-Bouin, it's like a really good opportunity because it's not a big stadium, but it's kind of lots. It's 19,000 19,000 spectators. So I think you can work on that, and I think Rugby Europe Championship are doing things great in order to fill the stadium.
Yeah, just to give a clue to people, it's not that expensive because you can buy the whole pack for the all four games for €90 in the Premier category, which is, well, in the middle of the stadium, so you can watch from left to right. It's not expensive as a field day to go watch good rugby. Nick, we're talking a lot about the men's rugby, but you also have been a great voice for the women's rugby, and the women's rugby Europe Championship is growing back. We have gone back to 4 teams this season, with Portugal joining Sweden, Netherlands, and Spain. So do you think things are starting to get back on track for the women's game in Europe, aside the Six Nations teams?
I hope so. I've also got my pal from 2014, Tamara Taylor, who is coaching the Sweden side. So I'm hoping that the Swedish side do particularly well. The conversation and the narrative around the women's game, it is getting bigger. We have the biggest World Cup coming, and it's now 18 months away. It's next year going to be held in England, and so as the World Cup gets bigger, then there are more places, and so the teams competing across the Rugby Europe Championship have to be aware of how much closer to the top table of international rugby that they are. You know, what's lovely about where the women's game has come on is that the tactical kicking in the game has been possibly one of the last things to arrive as the strength and ability to make 30, 40, 50 meter kicks has grown over the past decade or so. Katie Daly-McLean was probably one of the first proponents of that in the women's game, was an exceptional kicker, but we are seeing that growing now at international level. But ultimately, it is still a brand of rugby that puts the ball in the hand more often. So if you want to go and see running rugby like it was in the 80s and 90s, go and find yourself some top-level women's rugby to watch, because it's absolutely brilliant, and they're not playing endless kick ping-pong. And long may that be the case. But what we're also seeing is that because more women are now playing for longer, they've been in coaching setups and learning the game longer. And I'm not going to say that I know the game as well as some of these women playing at the level that they do, but it just means that with that knowledge, the complexities of coaching can now be improved. So what I'm kind of calling the top 2 inches, the rugby nous of women's internationals, are ever improving. And I have the great privilege of being able to speak to the likes of Dave Ward, who's at Bristol Bears here, of John Mitchell, who's now the England women's head coach. And these sorts of people talk about the fact that, you know, we can now add layer upon layer in terms of improving the abilities of these players and improving their decision making, where perhaps 5, 10, 15 years ago, the coaching would be more prescriptive. You'd be saying to players, we need to do that, you need to do that. Look over to the coaching box when there's a decision over whether we're going to go for goal or go for, you know, players are completely armed with making their own decisions now. And that autonomy, that belief is absolutely brilliant. It's what the game absolutely needs, and what is the greatest way of respecting the players and their development. And it's delivering. You know, we've got hugely competitive domestic rugby in the UK, and particularly in the English Premiership women's rugby, and internationally the chance to see that spreading across Europe. You know, these nations, Netherlands, Sweden, Portugal, Spain, they are not going to be as far behind in the women's game as perhaps some of their men's compatriots are, because the spread and the growth of the women's game is happening at a faster rate, you know, since its infancy, basically, across the land. And we've seen, you know, some of these countries play key parts in women's World Cups in the past. And we certainly look forward to them having plenty of time on that stage in the future via the Rugby Europe Championship as well.
I just want to kind of build on your point there as well, Nick, because the point you made earlier about coaching journeys, with Tamara Taylor now being there with Sweden, being such a tremendously experienced and like high level coach in the UK, and that really is a huge opportunity for them to carry on. And as you say, almost extend that gap between how high up their women's team and how high necessarily their men's is at the moment. You know, you look at Spain as being like one of the kind of like front runners with that. If you were asked who is the best Spanish rugby player of all time, you'd probably, the first name that comes to mind is probably someone like Patricia Garcia, right? Which is a brilliant position to be in. And that you'd really hope that, with these new coaches that are coming in, and as you say, that expanded style of play that's starting to happen in the women's game at this level, that it's only going to be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got teams like Estonia as well. I was reading them the other day. They've been coached by Graham Smith, who was the assistant coach of the England women's team in 2014. And he's been looking after Estonia, and they're on the way up. They're improving as well. So right across Europe, there are more women turning up to play this brilliant game of ours. And the more support, the more resource, the more money, ultimately, we can get them, the better. But also the chance for them to compete with each other more regularly, which is really important in terms of their development.
This is a question for Will and Gauthier. What do you think can be done to promote better the women's game? Will?
Once again, I think it's a case of get as many clips out there as possible and make these players household names as best as we can to rugby fans. The best thing for me personally, the reason why I would say I'm probably now in a position where I enjoy women's rugby to watch more than I do men's rugby. And a lot of that comes down to just the ability and the accessibility of being able to just fall in love with the players, and the coaches and the people who are involved in it. If you get the backstories and the personalities of these players, then immediately you'll support them 10 times more on the pitch, right? Like the Welsh national women's team are, one of my favorite rugby teams on the planet. And a lot of that comes down to, for example, like the WOU have this series called Her Story that they promote on their social media channels, where it follows the team around as they play, as they train, and tells a lot of the stories, the journeys that these players have been on. Again, extremely different stories and journeys to what of the kind of like men's professional and international rugby players will have, certainly at the top tier, so to speak. So again, I think that not only is it just showcasing the skills, as you say, for a lot of people will prefer like a running style of rugby, as Nick was alluding to earlier, which is one thing that you really can promote. But and it's very fast paced at the moment, women's rugby. But one thing for me, I think is really, really important is promoting the players, the coaches, the management, just the people who are involved in the game. It's a huge opportunity because sport is largely about emotion and sentiment, and if you can build that connection with fans, then that's only going to be a good thing for the sport.
Gauthier, your time.
Yeah, in my opinion, you have obviously to grow championship. I think England have the luck to have the most grown championship. I think, in my opinion, you have like a big TV rights deal. I think. What's the name of the diffuser? Sorry, isn't that the in England? Well, no matter what. But in France, as an example, you have one of the best team in the world, but you don't have like a big championship. You don't have TV rights except for the finals. There is some teams that put the game on Twitch, but there is no commentary. It's just like noise background, and it's not really attractive. So I will say, like they do in New Zealand, in England, you have to build a good championship in your country if you want to have a good women's game, and that it's quite difficult for some countries that either the other one too for some reason. And there's also the financial parts, like you can sell something and invest at the same time if you don't have the money. So you have to find the money first, but you have to sell it on the right on the right part, if I want to say it. But in France, obviously, first, if I want to take the example in France, it will be to first have a TV deal, but it's quite hard at the moment. So I think, and as I think I speak for Will too, but as like a content creator or YouTuber or whatever, I think it's all like point as a content creator to help this team to find the exposition or the exposure to media or to people, like trying to connect them between them. So I think, yeah, in my opinion, we have a big part to play in the women's game development. But first, we have to we have to find the right way to digitize it. And if we succeed, I think women's, like Nick said, they can grow faster than anything in rugby at the moment.
Excellent. Gents, last 5-6 minutes, so we're going to do some, well, simpler things. Nick, I'm going to start with you. What player? I know you can't be biased to one country only because you commentate a lot of the teams this year. So I'm going to say you can pick at least two players that you are most excited to see for the men's Rugby Europe Championship.
Oh, okay. Well, I was a big fan of Christy Kirika, and I think an opportunity to be in Romania. I've got to pick a Romanian because I'm gonna be out there, yeah, I think it'll be great fun to see how they get on, and then who else will I go into?
Oh, and Nick
No worries.
went down. Don't worry. So we'll wait for Nick to come back. Will, when Nick comes, we'll go back to him. So I know you might say Starty, but you can pick at least three. I give Nick two. You can go for free. So what will be your three players that you are most excited to watch and follow in the Rugby Europe Championship?
Oh, I've not actually seen Romania's squad yet, but a player that's really excited me recently has been Taylor Guntiniak in the centres. He is an absolute firecracker, and obviously his father is a legend of Romanian rugby. Really, really excited. I'm hoping that he gets back in and ends up playing again, because I know there's some difficulties with him towards the end of the World Cup. And another guy, potentially rogue shout, who I quite like the look of last year. For Poland, I quite like the look of Peter Hudson, young centre. He's 21 years old, and he looks like in a couple of years' time he could be one of those star players who knocks on the door of, the higher up nations, so to speak, as we currently look at it in the championship.
Okay, you can have one more. Very interesting too. So third one.
Oh, let's one more. Let's go with, an established player now, but one of my current favourite players to watch in the world is Geronimo Portela for Portugal.
Okay.
Is probably the most well-rounded upcoming 10 on the planet and has real potential to be a genuine world-class player in a couple of years to come.
Okay, very good picks. Pete Hudson, I really enjoyed that one. Gauthier, what will be your three picks of players that you are most excited to watch from the Men's Rugby Europe Championship?
I discovered a player with the Romanian Wolves. It was Paul Popoaia, which is like a fullback, and I was like, "What?" He go past the
great selection
every time. I was like, "Who is that guy?" And I was sad he didn't play the last game, either for injuries or because he was playing a final with the Bayamare team. But Paul Popoaia was like my surprise of the Area Super Cup, and I think for the second one, it's like one of the best prospects in theatre rugby at the moment. It's Luka Matkava, but I fell in love like before the World Cup with this player, and I think he can be like one of the first superstar for Georgia team. And I read like an article from Jared Wright that you work with Francisco on Planet Rugby, and I was like, yeah, it can be like the fly half of the Saracens. There is no like question about it. I think if he managed to find a good team, because at the moment I don't really know what he's doing with the Black Lion, even though it's a great pick for the Black Lion, but he deserves to be with one of the top team on the world at the moment. And I think he will. I think he will find a good agent that will find him a good deal, and ultimately it will become a great player. But the real question here is when is he going to become like the superstar that's Georgia and theatre rugby deserve to have like a decent exposure.
A third player. You have the two first one were great. Now I need a third.
Nicolas Martins, no question asked.
Uh,
Because of you and because of all the tweets you made, every time I go to Ultimate Rugby and I watch like his line of stats, I was like, damn, he made 16 tackles this week, and the next week like, damn, he made 15, and it's always like the right thing. He's really regular, and like Matt Cava, I think he deserves to go on the better team. Not better because Angoulême is quite a good team, but I think he deserves to go to a top 14 side, and it will not be like a waste of money to get him in a group.
Can I just say Gautier's won?
Well,
Nick didn't finish.
Let's listen, Nick. Nick, I gave them a chance to give 3 names. I only gave you 2, but we'll extend to 3, and we'll do here a small game. So your second player.
Okay, I'm going to go with Rodrigo Marta. Have we had him?
No, it's yours. Rodrigo is yours.
Good. Sorry about that, everyone. My phone appeared to die, so I'm now coming through on the webcam. I mean, he scored. Was it 4 tries last year?
Last season, 6 tries.
6 tries over, but I think it was 4 against Poland, wasn't it? Also,
yeah, 4 against Poland. Yeah.
And I think 24 years of age. So there's still plenty of rugby to come in those legs. Who else can I pick out? What about Daily Lemon? Have we had a shout for Daily Lemon?
Oh, that's a very good shout. Tell us about Daily Lemon.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just love the name. Frankly, it sort of sounds like a bit of medicine you should take. Have you had your Daily Lemon today? But I just really enjoyed one of those players that is playing international rugby. Also looks like the sort of player that is just in your local clubhouse, can probably help you put up some shelves if you need. Just and it's a real workhorse of a 12 in that centre position. I really liked a lot of what he did, was sort of leading from the front when he was playing for the Netherlands. So yeah, I think those are my 3 there.
So you're saying if you get tickets, Daily Lemon will help you put up some shelves. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
and of course we all have Rafael Estorti with our 4th pick, but that's never need to mention it.
You all pick your 3 picks. We're gonna do this at the end of the championship. I'm going to see their stats, and I'm going to compile who got the more points from you.
While I was off, I missed who everyone else said. But has anyone gone big time and gone David Niniashvili? I mean,
no. But Heller, Hudson, and Continiac.
Okay,
I got
sort of almost like pressing a rec cheat code to actually go with someone that is now a ridiculously talented player against everybody they play against. But still Georgia, still Rugby Europe Championship. There's your value.
I mean, I got Matt Cava, so it's kind of the same,
close.
But it's close.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so in after the men's Rugby Europe Championship comes to a close, I'll do the sum and see which one of you got the most points. Let's watch and see. So we are already on almost 1 hour. We have to leave. Before that, if you want to say a final word, each one of you, before I do a small promotion in the end for the finals day. So Nick, what are you more excited to see this year? What you want to see from the teams, and how would you sell it in one word to fans at home?
I'm going to shift this slightly away from the teams. The teams will give it everything they've got. The teams will, be working hard. Some of them in their jobs, like I mentioned earlier, they will be devoting everything they can, possibly. This, for me, is a call out to the fans. You made all your noise during Rugby World Cup in France. You talked about these amazing stories. There were players you'd never heard of that, like Will was saying, can become your household names, the people you're cheering on from the sidelines. Well, now it's the time to show up. Get yourself a ticket to either those finals, but certainly come along to any of the games in any other cities. Change your habit from going and sitting in a bar to watch the Guinness Six Nations, and actually come and sit somewhere else in Europe. Enjoy a different weekend. Take in a game with your mates and come and support the Rugby Europe Championship. Because if you truly believe in all of these players and the excitement that they showed you when you tuned in for those 7 weeks of the World Cup. Well, now's the time to repay that and go and cheer them on in their stadia, where the tickets are going to be dirt cheap, where you can have a brilliant time and also be away in a European city for a weekend. So for me, the teams will give it everything, but now it's time for the fans to do the same.
Well,
I'm going to actually lead on from what Nick was saying. So the thing that I am most excited about to see in this whole championship is the Netherlands. Because when I was out in the World Cup, you'd be shocked at the amount of fans I met who were from the Netherlands. And so that alone, as you say, like so much of the game is in the hands of the fans. If there are more fans of the sport's going to get better. The players are going to get better. The coaching is going to get better. And so that alone made me and my brother just say to each other, right, this year we're going to do a video on the Netherlands. You know, we're going to look at why we think the Netherlands is potentially one of the biggest growing markets in all of rugby. So if I were to describe it in one word, I would use the word future.
Future. Good word. Oh, my spine is tingling. Oh, good one. Gauthier, how would you sell it in one word and expectations for the Men's Rugby Europe Championship?
My one word will be question, because I asked question, and in my opinion, there's several questions that has to be asked. That's how Portugal will bounce back from the LWC progress. How will Spain handle the frustration of not being there because of some bullshit reason, even though it's fair. How Romania will try to build back what they lost. How will Georgia try to win again and try to step up and show why the Six Nations has to be a Georgia team in there. How will all the nation I didn't mention will want to be in the World Cup, will want to grow to try and have a spot in the next World Cup. So it's always the question that has to be asked, and I think you will have the answer if you watch the game, obviously. But I think Will said the Netherlands, but the Belgium, the Poland, the Germany, there's several teams that can pretend to not like a fair spot, because obviously there's better team, but they just have to go on the the qualification circuits, and the best they're doing and the best they're going to be hungry. And if you're hungry in rugby, if you want to win, obviously they're going to perform, and that's what we will see in this first REC. But I think Nick said future, so obviously in the REC 2025 and 2026 is going to get better and better and better, because the World Cup will going to approach, and it will be incredible. But you will have to need the eyes of the people that, like Francisco, Nick, or Will. I've saw this team for quite a long time, so just follow the rugby, and I think we will guide you toward the happiness of seeing the little nation succeed.
I think we could take the first words that Gauthier said and get one of those guys who does the film trailers and use those. It was very much like, can Portugal continue their reign from 23? Can Georgia live up to the hype? Can Spain come back from where they were? Like all of that, I think we need to.
Someone should get you to do commentaries, Nick.
We should get them scripted.
Well, we are ready to go to the Men's Rugby Europe Championship and also the women's. Thank you all for coming. Just to tell to the fans at home, the fun starts on the 3rd of February as Netherlands plays Spain. It's going to be the first game. And at the same time, Netherlands will going to play Sweden for the Women's Rugby Europe Championship in the same day. So watch all the fun on the Rugby Europe TV, and you have to see if you have a TV broadcasting deal in your country to watch the games. And also the 17th of March, we're going to have the finals day for the men's, and buy your tickets online. So thank you all for coming. This was the Stars and Scrums, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.